Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the Tea Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. I want to welcome everyone back to our series in April, Finding Your Fit. We've got some good tea for you tonight with my special guest who is going to be talking about please stop questioning my manhood, father-son relationships, and male identity. Make sure you drop some questions in the chat. Tell us, hey, let us know that you're here. Share this with someone who you think could benefit. This is a topic that comes up a lot as we are raising young males, but also as we just think about the relationships we want to have with the men in our lives. So tag a male, tell them to come on in. Tag a young person, tell them to come in, but also tag people who you just think could benefit from this conversation. You all know I like to be a good steward of time, and we've got a lot to get into. So it is my sincere pleasure to introduce Mr. Isaac Gilliard, behavior health counselor. Mr. Gilliard served in the United States military for 23 years and is a retired veteran. He worked as a state felony probation officer for 10 years. He is currently employed as a behavior health counselor with the Department of Community Supervision. His area of concentration is substance abuse prevention, and his passion is male mentorship. He is happily married with 2 children, ages 16 and 25. Welcome to Tea Time with Dr. Tarver. Mr. Gilliard, it's my pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, ma'am. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So excited, so much to get to. So, of course, everybody is wanting us to dive right in, so we shall. I want to start off this discussion by talking about this concept of masculinity. I have gotten into quite a few heated debates with some of my friends when we're talking about things such as a man's man, and we're not raising boys to be soft, and just confusion about sexual orientation and gender identity and sex organs and all of these things that I think sometimes men feel they have to be really protective about. Like, hey, I don't want anything that is going to make anyone think that I'm something I'm not. And so we often shy away from these conversations or just may not be educated about some of this. So talk to us about what are some of the factors that you feel define healthy masculinity or allow us to be able to develop just as healthy males in general.
You know what? I tell you what, that is, my God, that is one deep topic. A lot of things that impact healthy masculinity comes from societal influences and the way we've been raised, from whether it's just been with our mothers, our fathers, or a combination of both. But what I want to look at is how we develop men. We have this idea that a man's man has to be hard. You think about a man's man, he's got to be big, brownie, he's got to be muscular, nothing can faze him, and he has to have all the answers. So we hear this as young boys growing up, feeling like I have to have all the answers and I have to be strong. I have to stand in front of a female, when there's no such animal that says I have to be stronger mentally than a female. So we get this ideology that men, boys, males are naturally physically stronger than females. Right? That's the way God made us. Right? Well, we turn around and we take that same ideology and feel like because we should be stronger physically, we got to be stronger mentally. And so therein comes this toxic thing where we feel like I have to have all the answers. And that impedes healthy relationships in men or boys to men developing into healthy young men.
I think you've hit on something that's very important, this identity of what strength looks like in men, because we do often focus on the physical strength.
That's right.
You know, we focus on the sexual prowess, or we focus on the financial ability, you said, having all the answers.
Right.
And that doesn't leave a lot of room for men or young males growing up into men to feel like they can be anything other than those things. I've got to be the provider. I've got to be the strong person who, like you said, who doesn't show emotion, who takes care of you. And so it puts a lot of pressure on our young males. How do you think that affects them in terms of their development?
Well, let me say this right here. Let's look at it as how we do a computer. Computers can have so many different open programs. And when we look at the very essence of males, because we hide so many things, because society says it's not okay to vent, it's not okay to be emotional, it's not okay to talk, then we harbor all those feelings up here. And we have all those little open programs, which become barriers to communication, which become barriers to growth. We mature physically, but we don't mature mentally because we're so trapped and encapsulated within our own selves, our own internal demons. We don't get a chance to talk about those things. And when a platform is created for that male to talk, it's a non-trusting thing because we're worried about, is somebody going to expose me that I cried behind set? Is somebody going to tell that I was tampered with as a young man? Is somebody going to tell that I didn't have all the answers? So it's a lot of pressure on the average red-blooded American male.
And so then that ends up, sounds like, affecting men in a lot of different ways. So it's probably going to affect me on my job. It's going to affect me in my relationships with women, but it sounds like it could also affect me in my relationships with other males because I don't, it sounds like what you're saying is sometimes I don't even feel comfortable around other men because I don't want to be seen maybe in this negative way of being weak or being vulnerable in some way that suggests that I'm not strong.
Right. It suggests that I'm not strong. And I'm also at the same time measuring myself up against this other male who I feel that may be more confident than me. And so now I'm secretly using him as a measuring tool, and without even knowing what he's dealing with, where he came from, how did he get to be who he is? What barriers did he have to overcome? So all those little open programs there are just running in the back of our minds, and we devote so much energy towards them. So when it's time for us to deal with a regular problem, we don't have all the tools that we need because we've loaned ourselves out to so many other causes that we've never solved.
So what does that do in terms of worth? When you don't have, you realize I don't, because none of us have all the answers. When when I realize I don't have the answers, when maybe this image I want to have, something shatters it. So then how does that affect my sense of worth? And then how might that come across to other people?
But see, what it is, how it affects our worth is that we go and we try to embroider ourselves with things. We buy jewelry, we buy cars, we work out, we play sports. We try to do everything to fill those spaces when the only thing that can fill those spaces is genuine communication and affirmations. So what it looks like is that we'll go out and do so many other things. We try to be good at everything, but the cornerstone things that affect our belief system. So you'll see men that they're the, I'm not going to stereotype because it could be anybody. It could be me, you know, I'm not saying that it's not, but I'm just saying in general, the very thing that I count on to keep me grounded may be the thing that I'm the most insecure about. And the world will never know because I would do a good job at hiding it because the world says, I got to be strong. I got to have all the answers. And so if I put on a pair of glasses and a polo shirt and sit down and talk with Dr. Tarver, then he must be doing good. So if there are any male viewers out there watching, they may think, wow, he's got all the answers. He's this and he's that. And I may be a bucket of confusion, just dressed up good.
Not the bucket of confusion. Does KFC sell that?
A bucket. Yes.
Look, let me tell you, women are always thinking that we're the ones that's wearing the mask, that we're the ones out here covering up, and we'll cover up with our jewelry and our hair and our clothes and all of the things that we think anyway conveys to other people that we have it together. So what you're saying is, hey, men have similar patterns as well for covering up their worth issues and insecurities too. This might look a little different.
Oh yeah, it looks different. Then the world doesn't realize that we're doing it all the time, but we do it because we got pressures coming from everywhere. Because the world is saying, hey, we know you got to have an answer. And the world is not exactly making excuses for us, and not that the world is making excuses for women, but when it comes down to a man, there's just not much room for foolishness. So we continue to go out there and do those things that make us look like we have all the answers when we don't. We find worth in material things. We find worth in, sometimes it could be idolatries, but those things make us feel whole and complete. And when they run out, we're still sitting there, a shadow of who we're supposed to be.
You know, it's so interesting. I was having this conversation today about what happens when men transition in their lives. The reality is we're not going to always be beautiful for the rest of our lives. We're going to get some wrinkles, some stuff is going to start sagging, some things aren't going to work the same way that they used to work. And so if I have tied my identity, as you talked about, to having to know all the answers, my financial security, my physical ability, my sexual ability, then what happens when I lose those things? And I can lose those things at any point. I could get in an accident. I could be on medication. I could have a health issue that could take any one of those things away from me. And so what happens, like you said, I'm a shell of a person, but what happens to me? Do I even feel like I have any identity if I lose that? We've seen that with athletes. Right. So young men who are athletes and they get injured and then their career is over and they don't have an identity outside of that, because that's the only thing that anyone ever poured into them was, you can be this in this box.
That's right. And that's what people have praised over a period of time. It's so funny that we're talking about this. I used to have a head full of hair. I think most of us did. And I used to wear it. I cut hair on the side and I had this tight Jamie Foxx look.
Not the Jamie Foxx.
Oh yeah, Steve Harvey mix. I did. And I got into an accident. It could have been 15, 16, 17 years ago. And my head hit the roof of the vehicle. And as the months went on, my hair started falling out. Went to see the dermatologist and he was like, "You're a young man. Your hair will grow back. Don't worry about it." And every time I brushed my hair, more hair was coming out. And I used to color it to try to make it look right. It just didn't work, right? And I was just so torn with losing my hair, and I realized I was going bald, and I didn't want that. I wasn't proud of my head shape. And one day I got so tired of trying to make the top of my head look as if it was populated properly. I just took the clips and cut it all off, turned it backwards. And I walked out, I kept a cap on my head. I wasn't proud of who I was. I just wasn't. And one day, my wife looked at me and she said, "You know, you got the perfectly shaped head for a bald head." What are you talking about? When she told me that, that was it. That was it. I realized then that what I was trying to hold on to was not the bulk of me. It was not my definition. It was not my true value. Because anytime you lose all your hair, it takes you back to your default settings. And in my default settings, I learned more about myself because the distraction was gone. And so we have to break down those barriers and understand that the things that we build up that are temporal, they don't last. So if we work on the inside, we'll be fine. And as a man, that's hard to do.
First of all, I don't know if y'all are able to even get all of that. When I don't even know if it's acceptable for you to just be telling us these things because women so much struggle with hair loss, alopecia, right? We just saw a huge incident. Will Smith and Jada, we know that wasn't about that, but that was a trigger, right? That women struggle so much with, we tie so much of our worth and our identity to our hair, because a lot of times your worth and your value is in your tresses, in your locks, that's your crown. And so when you lose this part of you that you feel like has defined you all of this time, and like you said, you putting color on it, you trying to line up, like just out here not being able to accept that I've transitioned into a different phase doesn't make me any less.
Yeah, that's and my value was tied to it. And let's look at something too. Let's look at the industry of cosmetics.
Oh, come on, preach, sir.
20, 30 years ago, a man could just walk in the barbershop and get a haircut. A haircut, fade, maybe a box or something like that. They had good hairstyles then. Nowadays, they paint your hairline on. They draw on it. You get the razor. Everything is razor sharp. So the industry is preaching and teaching perfection. All right. And so you'll see men that don't want to mess that up. And they will go and spend 3 hours in a barbershop just to get that look. Because it's so tied to our self-worth and our self-value. But that very male that comes out looking like, he should be on the cover of a magazine, maybe the most insecure male. And he's insecure because maybe he wasn't affirmed as a male, maybe he was. But what society is now introducing or have been introducing for years says if you don't look like this, it's a problem.
You're not
This is
enough.
standard. That's right. This is the standard now.
Mm.
So either you get with the program or you fall by the wayside.
You know, and it's so interesting that you're talking about some of these aesthetic things, because I recognize that you've been getting messages as men for a long time about who you were and your worth and your value. You know, you are a disciplinarian. Oftentimes the stereotypes of a man in the household is a father. You're the disciplinarian, you're the provider, you're here for maintenance. And there isn't anything underneath that same what you're talking about. Like, you need to show up with the answers. You need to show up and take care of things. I mean, and it paints this very narrow and stereotypical view about who a man can be. And if you're not that, then as you said, who are you? But let's talk about the diversity of who men really are. Who are you, a father? Who are men as fathers in their households, other than these stereotypical views that we try to put you into?
Let me tell you, that's so funny. So as you introduced me and talked about my background, yes, I was a state probation officer, felony probation officer. And part of my job was going to the residences and checking out how my clients live. And I had this big guy come in, and he was way bigger than me, of course. And he just was so driven not to get close to anybody. I'm just hard. All I do is play sports. I'm a boxer. I'm everything. So I'm trying to communicate with him. He don't want to communicate. All right. Because communicating and talking and getting into your feelings, hey, that's not for me. That's not what I do. I'm not. So went to his house and knocked on the door. One of his daughters answered the door. And I said, hey, I'm Officer Gilliard. I need to see your daddy. She said, come in. I said, no, ma'am. I said, where's your mother? She called her mom. Mama came to the door and said, hey, I'm Officer Gilliard. I'm here to see so-and-so. So she said, oh, come on in. So I walked in and I was looking for him. I didn't see him, but I looked down on the floor and there's this big grown man sitting on the floor and his three daughters are around him, dressing him up, putting makeup on him, having tea time with them. So I looked and he saw me and he went to regain his composure as a male. And I said, stop, just stop. What you're doing is honorable. What you're doing is lovely. It's great. And I wish we had more fathers that would do like you. There's nothing wrong with you loving your children. There's nothing wrong with you getting yourself down on that level to be a genuine father. See, as men, we leave the better parts of us locked away in our cars. We leave them at home. We leave them in wall lockers. We, on our way to work, we might be listening to a little kiddie song. We might be listening to music that's 30 years old. But when we pull up and we see other people, we turn it down, or we might put on some hard music and we get out the vehicle and leave all that genuine stuff inside the vehicle, and we become what the world wants us to be. I'm hard. I don't have no feelings, no emotions, nothing matters. I'm just here to do what I got to do so I can leave. So when you communicate that to the general populace, they see just that. He's hard. He has no feelings. He got all the answers. But really, I just need somebody to help me. Being a man has nothing to do with knowing the answers. It has nothing to do with having it all. It has nothing to do with your physique. It has nothing to do with where you come from or even how you were raised. It has everything to do with you having the ability to stop and say, I need help. You knowing who you are and appreciating who you are. Just like I was hiding myself, hiding this bald head for the longest. I was covering myself up and not realizing that as soon as I lost the hair, my wife started giving me all kinds of compliments. She didn't give me that much compliments with the hair. It's bigger. But it's this, we have got to get away from the commonalities that are thrown at us. If we allow the talents that we have to come in, then we can still be disciplinarians, but we don't have to be the ones with all the answers. Yeah, My wife, she had the baby. So she looks at my son and she sees him as a baby a lot of times. She does. And when I see him, I see a bad boy. So it's nothing for me to pick the belt up and do what I need to do. My wife might be like, yeah, I think he probably had enough. That's fine. But if I had a daughter, I would be opposite. I would probably let her handle our daughter more because I don't understand everything that our daughter's going through. So she probably would handle more and I'll probably be way more protective of her. As for my son, I'll crack the whip with him, but I'll probably be more lenient with him when it comes down to letting him do things because I believe that I'm teaching him to protect himself. So he's much less of a threat out in the world in my mind than my daughter is. My daughter is a liability, and I'm teaching my son to be a force to be reckoned with, and that's can be toxic.
And that, you've led right into, I think, this next conversation piece, which is about how men raise sons versus how men raise daughters. And you
Right.
just talked about, I think, some of the narratives that a lot of us grew up with. That was my narrative growing up. My parents were so very strict on me, particularly my mother. My father
Mhm.
was more lenient. He would be the one that would advocate for me to be able to
Right.
get a little freedom.
Right.
But my mother was so very lenient on my brother because
Right.
there was this perception like, okay, he needs to get out there and he needs to experience things. He
Mhm.
can't get pregnant, but mama, he can get somebody pregnant. Like that logic makes absolutely no sense to me.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
but it was a struggle in our household trying to navigate that balance between how do you raise healthy, well-adjusted kids when there are these fears that, and you alluded to them, we still do have some of these gender stereotype fears about, okay, what do I need to do to prepare my son for the world versus how do I need to protect my daughter from the world?
Right.
So
Right.
talk a little bit more about those dynamics. What are some of the challenges that you
Well,
see in that?
coming from our old teachings, which can be our first learning, it
Mm-hmm.
was always preferred that as a man, you're going to get out and you're going to work. Your job is to go out, work, create the home, and you come back and you find a wife and you bring her to the home, and your job is to protect her, right? So, quite naturally, as a man, as a male, I'm going to go out into the world to find my own way because my job is to go out there and take the charge so that I can create a space for the wife that I want. All right. It that teaches that I have to have the answers. It doesn't necessarily teach togetherness, and I understand why that teaching exists because I teach my son similarly, but I also allow him to understand that there's nothing wrong with having an educated wife, an educated woman, a woman that might make more than you, a woman that might have more answers than you, a woman that might play sports better than you. There's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. So, along with teaching that to him, he could understand more so. I teach him how to take care of his mother. I teach him how to even look out for me. So if there was a daughter involved, yes, I would teach her that, hey, you are a liability. Okay. Um, if someone were to see you out in public, they probably would want to grab you quicker than they would grab the son. Because the perception is boys, men are stronger, girls, women are weaker physically. I said, that's just, there's no question in that. But I don't want you to be scared of the world. This is why I don't want you hanging out late. This is why I don't want you hanging out late. I think that educating our children more so to understand that it's not so much a matter of you being better than him, him being better than you. These are things that just happen. Son, you can cry. You can. You can do that. You can get a nice haircut. But because you got a nice haircut, you feel like you're too good to go out there and cut the grass, then we got a problem. Daughter, you can get your nails done. You can get your hair done. But if you feel like you're too good to go wash dishes because you don't want to get nothing messed up, then we got a problem. Okay. You can go out and accomplish these things. You can be who you want to be, but everything with good measure. And I think that if kind of sort of we practice that more so, we probably have more success.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say to son, you can also wash those dishes, and daughter, you can also cut that grass.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's important, and I think you were alluding to this. We
Yes.
recognize why our parents and grandparents taught us the way they taught, but we can expand. So
That's
it's
right.
no longer that there are these strict, narrow gender roles, but girls and boys can take out that trash. Girls and
Right.
boys can wash those dishes. Girls and boys can vacuum and
Right.
dust. Girls and boys can take care of that lawn. Right. So we learn, because what we're doing is we're teaching our kids skills.
We're
It's no
teaching them.
longer girl skills and boy skills.
They're just skills.
They're just
You know,
skills.
if my wife had to come in here and talk, she probably would say her husband cooks more than she do. And it's just so funny because that you said that. We we understand that this house has to be clean, but it's not a situation where I see the floor needs to be swept or vacuumed and I'm sitting around and wait on my wife to do it. If it needs to be done, it should just be done.
This should be done.
All to it. Really. If there's a big bag of trash sitting there, yes, I'm gonna grab it before my wife grabs it. I don't want to lift in that. But you bet your bottom dollar if I wasn't here, my wife would do it. And I think approaching it from that angle, um, it takes the pressure off
Yeah,
of people. It takes the pressure off of people. And
absolutely.
that was a difficult lesson to learn
Mm,
growing up. You
mm,
know, becoming a
yeah.
man
Mm-hmm.
and coming from such a strict background, it was hard to see um, a woman crawl up on the vehicle, change the oil, and change the tire. It bothered me.
Mm,
I wasn't taught like that.
mm-hmm.
And when I and this is just a story of mine, when I approached her, I was looking and I was so confused. And I was trying to do it myself because I didn't want her to do it. And she told me, she said, "This is my job and I'm skilled and I've been training for this for the longest and this is what I do." And it was an humbling experience to sit back and let her service my vehicle. And that bothered me for a long time. It did. It really did. But I got over it.
And that's honestly some of the work that we have to do. We have been
Mhm.
taught things, they're entrenched in us, they're a part of us. To think we don't have biases, of course we do. There
Mhm.
are certain expectations that we have based on gender. We know that they're present. It's important for us to acknowledge them and talk about them instead of, like you said, ignoring them, because this is what causes divides and gaps in
It does.
relationships, as you were talking about not being able to communicate effectively, because here I am feeling less than because I just haven't talked to you about something that's different than what I saw growing up.
Right, the pitfalls. They're pitfalls. And it causes it just causes us to stay in one train of thought. And because of the direction that the world is headed in, there's a blending of skill sets, there's a blending of jobs, there's a blending of everything. And it's just important that we teach our kids that it's okay for it to be a blending. But what are your talents? What is your purpose? And there's nothing wrong with knowing your purpose. There's nothing wrong
Absolutely.
with doing that.
It's
You know,
necessary to know your
it's
purpose.
necessary. You
Hmm.
know, there's you got your purpose and you can be useful. And there's a lot of things that you can do, but in order for a man to understand that, it has to be taught. And for those parents, those single mothers that don't have fathers in the house or whatever, it's so important that we don't take away from that child's masculinity. And it's important that we don't use children as pawns. And it's important that we don't inject poison into that child because that father's absent. It's really important. Whatever you feel for that man, whatever you feel about that situation, we don't give that to the child, because what that's going to do is going to cause that young man to grow up with your attributes. And he's going to get out there in the world and it's not going to work. Because what works for you as a woman is not going to work for him as a man. It just won't.
And I think the reality is you're talking about a lot of different issues here. One is that we put our wounds onto our children.
Right.
And so then we're interfering with our child's ability to be able to have a healthy relationship with their father, because as a mother, I don't have a healthy relationship with your father. And so you talked about using children, oh, well, because you don't want to be with me in a relationship, I'm not going to let you see your child. Or because you started another relationship with someone else after our relationship is ended, then I'm not, right? So we don't ever want to put our children in situations like that. But unfortunately, what ends up happening, if we're not healed, then we're going to hurt, and we're going to hurt through our children. But the other thing I'm hearing you say is the reality is that there are some nuances to being a man, nuances to being a woman. And we know that there are some universal skills: being an effective communicator, being able to problem solve, being able to articulate yourself, being able to have worth. But we do know that in environments, you move different as men and as women. How I talk amongst my girlfriends might be different than how I talk amongst my male friends. And so we do have some realities of the world that we live in, that, yeah, and I don't necessarily think that that is a hindrance or makes us, a liability in any way per se, but it is that we have to be careful, because I, as a woman, would not want to go into an environment with a bunch of men. I think most women would find that very uncomfortable, because because of some of the things that we feel about men and being an only woman, and that we've been taught, hey, that's a dangerous situation. You mentioned that earlier. I'd be talking to my daughter about, hey, don't put yourself in dangerous situations, right? So those are realities that we do have to navigate. But as you talk about raising a young male, what are some of the challenges in raising boys into it? How do you teach them how to be well-adjusted, not toxic, well-adjusted, navigating between a world that does treat males different, especially Black males, because they are often feared, or negative stereotypes about them? How do you prepare a young male to live in that space, but then also be able to be in a space where he can be vulnerable and be able to connect with other people and not have to hide who he really is? When does a Black male get to be safe?
Exactly. Children oftentimes don't do what we tell them to do. They do what they see us do. Okay. They just do. And educating, and I'm just going to always use my boys. I don't hold back with them. When I'm talking about, talks about sex, talks about women, talks about gangs, education, the military, Black Lives Matter, pregnancy, I just don't hold back on them. And I tell them everything that I can tell them, but I also believe in modeling behavior. So the way I treat my wife, I heard my son tell me that when he gets married, he's going to do the same thing for his wife. The way my son sees me clean up is the way that he now cleans up. The verbiage that I use, my sons use some of the same verbiage. Right? And that's a real nice fairy tale. But at the end of the day, we know that these boys are going to do things. So let's talk about gangs. All right. Tell them about the types of gangs, where these gangs are, why people join gangs. When you're on Facebook Live, when you're on Instagram, when you're calling out people, these things affect more than just you. Pulling up case studies, showing them people in their age bracket, look what happened to this person because of this, because of that, because of this, because of that. Being that voice of reasoning for my son, and creating that platform where you could talk to me about anything. You can talk to me about, I woke up this morning and I didn't feel right. What was not right about how you felt? Well, in my growing area, I felt this way. Let me tell you what that is. I don't want the world to tell you about what that is. Okay. Let's talk about how a girl gets pregnant. Let's talk about what goes along with that. All right. Let's talk about how to treat women. No, you don't use the B word. No, it's not right to walk around with your pants sagging. Daddy don't do it. You're not going to do it. I'm not going to buy those pants for you. And if I catch you with them, I'm going to take them. Okay. This is a style, but that's not a good style. This is what you should look for. This is what you should have. And after talking about that, son, tell me what it is you think about what we just talked about. Tell me what you're feeling. What is going on in school? How do you feel about this? What do you feel like this person went wrong? And talking about that stuff, I get sometimes information I don't want. I, right. But yeah, I don't want all of it. Being able to navigate through some of these things that these kids are dealing with, they come and tell you everything when you're not judging them and you're creating a safe space. So, what I'm saying in a nutshell is communication is what is keeping a lot of our kids together. Communicating. I'm going to teach you how to drive. I'm going to take you to this part of the city to show you this. I'm going to show you that. I want to show you it. So I know when you walk out of here, I can sign off and say, I know I taught my son how to deal with this. You don't have to be like daddy, but you can have a lot of daddy's attributes. You don't have to be like mommy, but you can have a lot of mommy's attributes. And just like the word of God says, you train a child right, they will not go away. They can go away, but they're going to come back.
Always.
Yes, ma'am. Always. And that's just what I believe.
Well, but it sounds like what I'm hearing is this engaging form of being a parent. Now, we grew up sometimes where our parents were they talked to us. They told us what to do. You were to be seen and you not be heard. Some
Right.
of those generations where you didn't get to have dialogues, you didn't get to have a discussion about what was going on. There wasn't the opening for that. And much like you said, I think they didn't want to know what was going on, but they also did not feel like we had the capacity to be able to have emotions. Like, you're a child, you don't get to have emotions. You're a child, you don't get to have opinions. You're a child, right? So being able to model for your children, one, because I think it's important. It's not, I grew up in the do what I say, not what I do era. But what you're doing, which I appreciate, is you can do what I do, but I'm also going to teach you to do other things that are healthy as well. So you don't have to be a carbon copy of me, but you are going to see me walking what I'm talking.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
it's important for our young people to be able to see modeled for them by their fathers emotion, modeled for them by their fathers checking in. Daddy sees me, daddy recognizes, hey, how you said, I'm gonna check in with you and see how you feel about that.
That's right.
All right, we're gonna have this conversation, and then I'm gonna make sure you're okay after this conversation, because I may have to attend to you emotionally when I tell you some things that might be tough, because these conversations are tough. Yes, there are gangs out there. Yes, there is the potential for you to have risky sexual behaviors. Yes, there is a chance for you to cheat on a test. Yes, there is an exposure for you to substances. There is all kinds of sexual things out there that might not be appropriate for you at this point, that can alter the way that you look at relationships and see yourself. So I want to be the one to teach you. I don't want you getting secondhand information from a third-hand source. I want you getting it directly from me so we can process it.
That's
so
right.
you can understand how to deal with it, because it is coming.
Right. It's coming, and it's coming like an avalanche. And you have to be ready for this. You have to be ready for this big transition that the world is making. This world of sexual identity, sexual misidentity. This is who I want to be. The world provides so many different options that did not exist many, many years ago. But now there's so many options out there. And these kids are being able to just ascertain whichever one they want. And I want my kids to be happy with who they are. Be genuinely happy with who you are. Okay? Be happy. You want to play ball? Let's get you playing ball. You want to wrestle? Let's help you wrestle. I want you to be happy, because if you're happy when you leave my house, you're not going to go out there 10 years later and all of a sudden Aaron turns into Erin. You're not going to necessarily do that because you're happy. Your questions about your sexual identity, your questions about sex have been answered. It's been rooted in the Word of God, and this is just what it is. And if you happen to go out there, I believe that you'll return.
Well, and I think it's important for us to recognize that Identity is something that is biological. Identity is
Mhm.
something that is also created. And
Mhm.
so we want to create a safe space for our kids to explore who they are,
That's correct.
whatever that may look like. And
That's
so
right.
it may not look like what I want it to look like,
That's right.
but it is going to look like what feels genuine to you. And as long as you are doing things that are loving to yourself
Mhm.
and kind to yourself, and you're not trying to fill voids and holes
That's right.
with people or things, then
Right.
that's what's really important. So, I will definitely say that most of the time when we're young, we already begin to identify with who we are
That's right.
as a being. In adulthood, we just get to express that more comfortably. So we want to create a safe space for wherever
Mhm.
our kids fall in that. We don't want to ever make our
Mhm.
kids feel like we don't love them,
That's right.
by how they identify, because there are so
Right.
many different ways we all can identify.
That's correct.
And one is not any better than the other. It's just
Mm-mm.
about you being genuine to
Mhm.
yourself, whatever that looks like.
That's right. And it's like I want you to have the freedom, especially as a boy, to tell me what you are actually thinking. Tell me what it is you're thinking, and and you don't have to worry about daddy not loving you. You don't have to worry about daddy judging you. Tell me what you're thinking. Maybe it's something that I could clear up. Maybe it's something that I could provide answers to. And both of my boys have done that. They've come and asked me, what does this mean? And I had the honor of unearthing that and unwrapping that for them, because the way it was presented elsewhere wasn't too kosher with me. But being making it possible for a man, a male, to show emotions and be vulnerable, that's the biggest gift you can give a male,
Yeah.
is provide space for him to be vulnerable. Because if you can provide space for that man to be vulnerable, then all those open programs up here will start closing. You'll start handling that stuff. And so when they present themselves to the world, they're not a shell of themselves. They will they'll know it's okay to be emotional, and they won't feel like I have to fit into this mode, because a lot of males you see now walking around, they're confused, and we expect them to do things that the program was never activated or installed. It's not there because it was never placed
Wasn't
there.
ever taught. Yeah.
It was just never taught. I bought a truck last year, and I really do like the truck. And anybody who knows me knows I love trucks. And I called the dealership. I said, "Why is this thing not working?" And I said, "Sir, I've tried everything, and I'm looking at the manual, and this is not working." He said, "Sir, okay." He tried to troubleshoot and couldn't get it to work. He said, "Give me a VIN number." So I gave him the VIN number. He said, "Sir, your truck didn't come equipped with that. There's
Mm,
no program there." So I'm sitting here beating up on this truck, trying to make this truck do something that it was not engineered to do.
mm,
So if the program is not installed, then why am I trying to get it to perform?
mm.
So with a male, if you didn't teach him how to wear his pants, you can't blame him for wearing it the wrong way. If you didn't teach him the importance of respecting women, the importance of working, getting an education, then how are you going to blame him for something that he wasn't taught?
Come on, preach.
You can't. It's impossible. Just because I might look that way, it doesn't mean that I know I'm biologically a male, a red-blooded male, and I don't have all the answers. And that would be my message to anybody. I don't have all the answers, and I solicit whatever help I can get to get those answers. And I think that's not just being a male. That's being an adult.
Being a human being. Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
You mentioned not being programmed, and when I tell you that, I preach. Come on, truck example.
Hmm.
Talk about coping, right? So we've never been taught as males, how to deal with, how to manage, how to. Some of us don't know how to communicate because no one ever showed us how to communicate in a healthy way. If I
Right.
grew up with people yelling and cursing at each other, and when we get mad, we put hands on each other, and
Right.
when we get frustrated, we don't speak for 2, 3 weeks, and then we come. Right, so we're doing this dance. That's what I've seen all my life. how do I learn how to cope? What does healthy coping look like
Right,
for
right.
me as a male?
As a male, healthy coping starts with recognizing that you got a problem with coping, period.
Mm,
Because some of us don't think we have a problem. Some of us are caught up in with this thing called pre-contemplation. We don't think we have a problem. We really think that what we're doing is working. And it's not until we um, run up into a situation that becomes detrimental to our growth or detrimental to our health or our love of ourselves do we realize I got a problem with communicating. I got a problem with understanding. I got a problem with how I conduct business. Well, my advice is for that male to find another healthy male or whoever you idolize. And I say use that loosely because sometimes who we idolize is not who we should idolize. But finding a healthy male or a male that looks like he's got it together and studying that man is some things that my daddy instilled a lot of things in me. He instilled discipline, toughness, and everything. He did. He really did. I, my mother was nurturing. My mother was long suffering. I got all of that from both of them. But when I got out into the world, I still had barriers to communication. I couldn't communicate. I couldn't. I didn't understand because I thought the world was going to be just like what my parents painted to me, and it wasn't. So I had to sit back and I had to study men in general. And I asked questions. I questioned a lot of males, a lot of them. And as I did that, I realized, well, he's got more answers than he do, but I like what he's doing things over here. And I had to compile traits from all these men and put them into my database and construct the way I should operate. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't. He didn't. But guess what? I pulled from every source I could. And these were males that I deemed to be professional in doing the right thing. And not saying that they were all doing the right thing. So for those people that don't have that strong masculine presence around them, you just have to find men that you believe are doing the right thing and pull pieces from each one of them. Sometimes we have uncles that are doing right. Sometimes they're grandfathers. Okay. They could be a big brother, could be a school teacher. There's nothing wrong with emulating somebody that seems like they're oriented into the right direction. But again, that's not to say that they all have it together, but just pulling attributes from different people will do it. There are movie stars that are going the right direction that we believe. You can watch some of their podcasts, watch what we're doing now. They're ways of getting around things. If you didn't grow up with a father in your life and you're now a father, give that child what you desired in a father. You wanted a father that played ball with you, play ball with your son. You wanted a father that would sit down and talk to you, talk to your son. You wanted a father that provided a good upbringing, a good Christmas presents, um, a comfortable home. Then you provide that for your child. Whatever it is you're missing, you give it, and then you, in a sense, kind of get healed. I believe
yeah, I definitely
it will do something.
agree that there are so many resources, right? We just don't know what they are because, like you said, we're still wearing that mask. We're still hiding. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be embarrassed. And I think sometimes males have difficulty asking other men about
Hmm.
things because they don't want to feel like they're less
Hmm.
than or inadequate, or they're going
Right.
to be judged and they're going to be criticized. And I think what you're saying is find the safe ones, because
Hmm.
everyone is not going to be that person
That's
that you
correct.
need to talk to
They won't be.
and be vulnerable with.
Hmm. And then you don't have to act. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
just observing people. I've got so many adopted uncles around. I can't even count them. So many, and they all weren't at the church. Some were co-workers that I watched, and then I could lean on my own daddy for wisdom and advice, but there's things that even daddy don't know. All right, because daddy did the best he could, where he's at, and this world as it is now, we need guidance and direction. So there's nothing wrong with reaching out or observing another male. There are other resources out there, more clinical than anything, but a lot of times we don't want to open up to those type resources, and they are good resources. I'm in the helping profession, and that's part of what I do. But being able to talk to other males and build equity in them is how I've been able to communicate with other people.
And it is important that we have our people, we have our tribe, as you said, and there are, outstanding mothers who are not partnered, who are raising very healthy, well-adjusted males. And so we're definitely not saying on any level that not having a male around means that your child can't be healthy and well-adjusted. But
Right.
it is important for us to also be around people who have experienced similar things. We do recognize that we are a collective people. And
Definitely.
so it is helpful when you can talk to another male who has been through similar things and experienced things that are important to you and can have that guidance. And so when we can, having your church family or your mentorship or like you said, people at work or whatever, who can also supplement and support the work that has been doing. And even when you do have a father in the house, sometimes it's still helpful to have other men around you, because we all have different perspectives and we add different things. As you said, no one man has all the answers. So you get to a collective group and you can really gain a lot of wisdom by having multiple males in your life who can nurture you in different ways. The ones that can say, I love you, the ones that can hug you,
That's right.
the ones that can encourage you, the ones that can say, hey, you don't have to play a sport to be worthy. You're really good with your hands, so let's work on that. Or you're very intelligent and bright, let's work on that. Or you're artistic, let's work on that, right? So we get out of these molds of it has to look a certain way in order for it to be love. From males to males, there's so much love. Love is infinite. So we got plenty of room to love a bunch of folks, but we also have plenty of room for people to pour into us in healthy ways. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, and I like that too. Males loving other males. That is like really important to help the next man see that there's nothing wrong with saying I love you, I care about you, I was thinking about you, I'm hoping that you're okay. Because that man might be like, "Oh, he's saying that to me like that," but deep down inside, he's thinking, wow, he's thinking about me. He care about me. And it does something. It might not break down the entire wall today, but you keep doing that, that wall comes down more and more. And I thank God for my brothers, because I'm a square. I am. Anybody will tell you I'm a square.
What does that mean?
I'm just a square. Okay, L7. I'm just not doing it, right? But I got brothers that help my sons experience things that I just wouldn't be willing to do. And it helped them be well-rounded. They can talk to them, because all the answers not going to come from daddy. It's just not. I'm going to help create that mode for them. I'm going to help create that space for them, and then safeguard it, but then give it to them. And now they can input other people in there to enhance their experiences, because I want my sons to exceed me. And I recognize that I'm a very important part of their success. But at the same time, it's not just me. It's not just me. I don't want my sons to join the military because I did. I don't want them to work in my profession because I did. I want to help you find your purpose, because you got purpose, you got your purpose, and you got usefulness, and they are both nice. All right. You can be useful. You could, like, as a soldier, I was a good soldier. I was a good, they told me I was a good officer. That's what they said. They said, I like Officer Gilliard. They said, I like First Sergeant Gilliard. He was good, good, good. And I fit into that uniform, and I fit into that mold. And I was serving, I was being very useful. But then I got to thinking, I like talking to people. I like working with people. I like helping people. So now it's time for me to find my purpose. My purpose was to be a counselor. That was my purpose. Okay. I was useful as a probation officer and a soldier, but my purpose is to be a counselor. So I want to help my sons. You're good at this, you're good at that, but what is your purpose? What is the thing that when you wake up in the morning, you just feel so good about? Okay, what is it? And let me help you develop that. And when you do that, they don't have time to be thinking about everything out there, because now you are helping them do something that they want to do. And then they'll tell you all their business too.
Well, and it's an opportunity because now I'm in a space where I feel comfortable and I feel safe, and the focus isn't so much on me, the pressure of just you drilling me with questions.
Right.
We're engaging in something together. I
Yes,
feel
ma'am.
supported, I feel loved, I feel valued. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, it's much easier for us, safe space, right? It's much easier for us to open up in safe spaces where
Yes,
we have people that can show us love, can hear us, can see us.
that's right.
Then I can be more vulnerable,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
How do you feel like the military, you mentioned the military, how do you feel like that shaped you in terms of just your identity as a male, and then also in raising young men? Because we do know that there is you mentioned that to be a good soldier, there are things that you do as a soldier that you probably don't necessarily do in the civilian world in the same
Mhm.
way. So
Yes, ma'am.
talk to us about that.
I did serve 23 years in the military. I started when I was 17, but I got to give credit to my parents, because my father never served a day in the military, but he was like a drill sergeant.
Mm.
Everything that I learned about discipline and about um, carrying out duties and orders came from him. Everything I learned about not giving up, being kind, being responsible, came from my mother. So the military, what it did was that safe space I was talking about that my parents created for me, they gave it to me, and I took it and gave it to the military, and the military dropped other things in there. They dressed me up, okay? They gave me, they helped me with my credit. They helped me make more money. They helped me travel. They helped me become a little more exposed. But the fibers, the very moral fibers
Mhm.
of who I am, came from my parents. So once the military got me, then I got to travel. I did this and I did that. Um, I got to meet people, go to other countries, and so it exposed me a little more. But it added to my identity, of course, because they got away from calling me Ike and started calling me Sergeant Gilliard, First Sergeant Gilliard, and so that became a strong thing within me. And the discipline I had as a child was even more fortified once I joined the military. And I came much more rigid in my belief system, um, and not moving as much. And I think that actually made me more of a square.
I think what you are trying to communicate is that you like structure.
Hmm.
And right, so that is not being a square. But we all have different interests. We all have, like you said, we all have different purposes, and
Right.
so it's important for us to operate in spaces that feel safe for us.
That's
And
right.
so it may not look like someone else's space, but again, it's not worse or better than anyone else's. It's mine, and because
Right.
it's mine, then I get to create it in whatever way that I want to.
That's right.
What would be your last words that you would want to share with anyone who has a young male that they're raising into adulthood, or who happen to be involved with young men, or men who may be having challenges with some of the things? What are some of the
Mhm.
words you'd like to leave with our viewers and listeners?
Right. Okay. I'd like to say, communicate. If you're a mother or even a father, um, raising a young man, um, let them talk. Sit back and let them talk. Learn their nonverbal language. Learn their verbiage. Investigate without investigating. Let them tell you whatever it is they want to tell you. Ask them, show me how to play this game. Show me what this means on Instagram. Show me that. Show me this. And it'll make them feel like, hmm, my daddy is genuinely interested in what I'm doing. And then they won't necessarily hide everything from you, but communicate, um, create that safe space, and definitely don't be judgmental.
That's a good word right there. Don't be judgmental. Come to where they are instead of
Mhm.
trying to get them to come to where you are.
Yes.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on today. You're actually my first male guest. So I want to thank you for coming to Tea Time with Dr. Tarver, dropping these nuggets, giving people a broader perspective about who men are instead of some of these narrow stereotype perspectives, and recognizing that men can be a range of things. We don't have to limit you, and we want to make sure that you all aren't limiting yourselves. To all my viewers, next week we're going to be talking about From Mommy Dearest to Mommy Did This, Thursday, April 21st, with my podcast guest, Michelle Jones, LPC, at 7:30 live on Tea Time with Dr. Tarver. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and all your listening platforms. It is always a pleasure to have you all join me. I'll see you next week. Be well.